At my birthday party, my mother-in-law made everyone laugh by telling them I got my job through pity hiring, then loudly asked, "Do you even deserve that promotion?" I tried to laugh it off. Until my boss walked in and said, "Actually, I was just about to say something important. I've never liked parties much, but my husband insisted we do something special for my 45th birthday. He said I deserved to be celebrated, especially with everything going on at work." I'd been working for almost 2 decades in policy research and had recently been told, unofficially, that I was being considered for a major promotion. It wasn't final yet, but my director had hinted it was mine if the board signed off. It felt like something worth being proud of. I work in Washington, D.C., but we live just outside in Alexandria, Virginia. It's quiet and homey, and I love the peace it gives me after long days at the office. I'm one of very few women, let alone black women, in a senior position at my company, which often feels like walking a tightrope. There's no room for mistakes. Every achievement comes with an invisible asterisk in other people's eyes. And still, I had managed to thrive. The day of the party, I had no idea what was waiting for me. Silas had gone all out. He strung up lights in the backyard, hired my favorite local bakery to deliver cake and pastries, and even got some old jazz records I love playing on vinyl in the background. It was a warm spring evening. Friends from college, coworkers, a few neighbors, and family filled our backyard. The conversations were light, drinks were flowing, and for the first couple hours, it actually felt like a celebration. Then Bernice arrived. Bernice is my mother-in-law. A retired ER nurse who raised Silas on her own after his father left. She's sharp in the way a scalpel is sharp, precise, cold, and capable of cutting without leaving visible wounds. From the beginning, she's disliked me. Not because of anything I did, at least not directly. I suspect it's because I don't fit the mold she wanted for her son. I'm focused, career-driven, and I don't sugarcoat things. To her, I'm too serious, too proud, too unbothered by her need for control. She's the kind of person who cloaks cruelty in humor and tells you to lighten up when you don't laugh. I tried to keep my distance that day. I was busy chatting with coworkers, including my boss, Rena. Rena is brilliant, tough but fair. She doesn't give out praise lightly. So the fact that she'd even come to my birthday meant something. I wanted everything to go smoothly. I should have known that was impossible with Bernice in the room. After the cake, people began making casual toasts, nothing formal, just a few kind words here and there. Silas got up first. He said some sweet things about how proud he was of me, how hard I worked. It was lovely, if a little awkward in the way only a husband's public compliments can be. A friend of mine from undergrad said something funny about how I used to eat ramen for every meal while building my career. We laughed. Then Bernice stood up. She had that look on her face, smug, slightly amused, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. She raised her glass and said, "Well, since we're all praising Alina tonight, I'd like to add my own little story." People turned to her politely. I felt a twist in my gut. She looked at Rena and smiled. It's just so touching, the way companies make room for people these days. Like, hiring folks because they tick a few boxes. Some call it affirmative action, I like to call it pity hiring. Laughter bubbled around us, but it was the nervous kind. People looked at each other, unsure if they should react. She turned to me, eyes sharp. "And now they're saying you're up for a promotion, huh? Do you even deserve that, Alina?" My mouth went dry. I stood frozen in place, unsure if this was really happening. I heard someone near the back mutter, "Jesus Christ." I tried to laugh, a weak chuckle that sounded more like a cough. "Bernice is just joking," I mumbled, barely above a whisper. But Rena stepped forward. She set down her drink calmly, with deliberate motion. "Actually," she said, "I was just about to say something important." The entire backyard turned quiet. Rena smiled at me, then spoke louder so everyone could hear. "Alina isn't just being considered for a promotion. As of next month, she'll be our new director of strategic programs." Gasps. Someone clapped. Then a ripple of applause spread. She's led some of our most complex projects and brought us results we didn't think were possible in the timeline she had. That's not a pity. That's excellence. Bernice said nothing. Her face was unreadable. Rena added, looking around, there's a reason I came here today. I don't usually attend staff functions like this. But I came because I wanted to personally acknowledge the incredible work Alina does. In front of the people who matter most to her. She raised her glass. To Alina. Everyone echoed it. To Alina. The applause eventually faded, the party moved on, but I stayed shaken. When the last guest left, and the backyard was littered with empty cups and crumpled napkins, I didn't feel celebrated. I felt exposed. Silas and I stood in the kitchen scraping plates when I finally said, she humiliated me. He didn't respond at first. Just scrubbed a dish harder than necessary. She said that in front of Rena. And you just stood there. She was drunk, he said quietly. I laughed, bitterly. No, she wasn't. She meant every word. She's always meant it. He set the dish down. I didn't want to cause a scene, she already did, I snapped. You could have said something. Anything. He looked down, guilt on his face. I don't know how to fight her, Alina. She's my mom. I stepped back from the sink. Then maybe I need to stop letting you shield her from consequences. He looked startled. Like he hadn't realized until then that this might change things between us. And I hadn't realized until that moment how exhausted I was. Not just from that night, but from years of enduring her comments, her slights, her superiority, and Silas's silence. I went upstairs to shower, letting the hot water burn the frustration off my skin, but it lingered. It had taken 45 years and a party meant to celebrate me to finally make me see how much I had been tolerating. And I wasn't sure I could keep doing it. I didn't sleep that night. After the shower, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing the hum of the fridge downstairs and the occasional creak of the floorboards as Silas moved around, tidying things that didn't need tidying. I could feel the words we weren't saying pressing into the air like humidity before a storm. I thought about how often I'd been told to not make a big deal of things, by Silas, by coworkers, by people who meant well but wanted me small, quiet, manageable. I thought about how many times Bernice had smiled in that tight, polite way while slicing into me with words just ambiguous enough to be defended as jokes. I'd laughed along. I had smiled through it for years. But this time had been different. This time it wasn't a family dinner or a private jab. She had brought that venom into my career, into my accomplishments, my space, and tried to taint it with her bitterness. And Silas had stood there and let it happen. He came to bed sometime after midnight. I pretended to be asleep, though my body was rigid, and I knew he could tell. He slipped under the sheets and turned away from me. The space between us felt wider than it had in years. The next morning was thick with silence. He made coffee and 2 pieces of toast, just like he always did, but didn't ask if I wanted any. I didn't eat. I sat at the dining table scrolling through my emails, even though I had the day off. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Rena. Hope you're getting rest today. If you ever need me to say it again, louder, I will. I smiled, small, but genuine. Then it hit me like a wave. I had waited so long for someone to stand up for me that when it finally happened, I didn't even know how to hold it. Silas eventually sat down across from me. I called her this morning, he said. I raised an eyebrow. She says she was joking. That people are too sensitive these days. I scoffed, louder than I intended. But I told her she crossed a line. That she doesn't get to come to our home and speak to you like that, especially not in front of your colleagues. I said she needed to apologize. I looked at him. And what did she say to that? She said she'd think about it. Think about it? My voice cracked like glass. She dragged my name through the dirt at my birthday party, tried to undermine my entire career, and she's going to think about apologizing? He winced. She doesn't think she did anything wrong. She never does. And you've never made her. That hit him. He looked down again, like the kitchen floor was more interesting than his wife's anger. I just didn't want to escalate, he said. No, I said. You didn't want to be uncomfortable. There it was. The truth that had been growing like a weed between us. Silas wasn't a bad man. He was kind and loyal in many ways. But he had spent his entire life avoiding conflict, and I had spent mine learning how to survive it. And for years, I had mistaken his quiet for support, when really, it was absent. I stood up, grabbed my coat. I didn't have anywhere to go, but I needed air. Where are you going? He asked. For a walk. Can we talk when you get back? I didn't answer. I walked through the streets of our neighborhood, past blooming dogwoods and front porches with rocking chairs. I remembered when we first bought our house, how proud Silas was, how we picked out curtains and argued over backsplash tile. It felt like a lifetime ago. I remembered thinking then that this man was solid, dependable. And he was. But now, I was beginning to wonder if dependability was enough when it came without defense. After about 45 minutes, I found myself near the little lake behind the community center. There was a bench there I liked. I sat and watched ducks paddle lazily across the surface. I pulled out my phone and saw another message, this time from Marissa, a friend from college who had been at the party. You okay? That woman has nerves. Honestly, if I were you, I wouldn't let her in your house again. I stared at the message. Not let her in again. Could I do that? Could I make that kind of boundary? I'd always played the long game with Bernice. Tried to wear her down with politeness, with grace. But that game had a cost, and I was starting to realize how heavy the price had become. When I got home, Silas was sitting on the couch with a mug of tea, untouched. I talked to Rena this afternoon, I said. Just to thank her again. She said she meant everything she said. That she'd been waiting for a moment to give me that promotion, and she was just waiting on final board approval. She said my work changed the direction of 3 major projects in the last year. Silas nodded slowly. I'm proud of you, he said. I know, I said. But I don't need you to just be proud. I need you to protect me. He looked up at me, eyes full of something close to fear. Are you saying you're done? I shook my head, but not to reassure him. I'm saying I can't live in a house where I'm not defended. We didn't talk much that evening. He said he needed to think. I told him I'd be staying in the guest room for a while, just to have some space. Not as a threat, not even out of anger, just clarity. The next day, he sent me a screenshot of a message he had sent to Bernice. It was the first time I'd seen him use the word unacceptable about anything his mother had done. But what he did next would matter more. 2 days passed before I said more than a sentence or two to Silas. We moved around the house like polite strangers, each of us sensing the weight of a shift neither of us could fully name yet. I worked remotely from the dining room, while Silas came and went from school, sometimes leaving me a mug of tea near my laptop, his quiet olive branches. I didn't touch them. I needed more than gestures. The screenshot of his message to Bernice had been something. A beginning, maybe. It read, Mom, I need you to hear this. What you said to Alina at her birthday was cruel and unacceptable. It wasn't a joke. You tried to humiliate her in front of her colleagues, and you succeeded in making her question the safety of her own home. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to apologize, sincerely, directly. Otherwise, we're going to have to take a step back from our relationship. It surprised me. Not just the words themselves, but the firmness of them. The clarity. I had waited years to see that side of him, to see that he could draw a boundary not just with me, but for me. Still, I wasn't ready to collapse into relief. Boundaries aren't about a single text message. They're about consistency. Enforcement. And I'd learned the hard way not to trust a single gesture too soon. On Thursday afternoon, Bernice called. She didn't try me, she went straight to Silas. I heard the phone ring in his office and his quiet voice answering. I didn't try to eavesdrop, but I didn't leave the hallway either. He didn't raise his voice, not once. But I could hear the steel under his words, the calm insistence that this wasn't something we were just going to sweep under the rug. After about 10 minutes, he stepped out of the office. I was in the living room, half pretending to read. She wants to apologize, he said. I looked up from the book I wasn't really reading. To me? Or to you? She said both. But she understands it has to be in person, and that you may not want to see her yet. I nodded slowly. She's right about that. He stood there, unsure of what to do with his hands. Would it help if I told you I didn't just say it for you? When she made that comment, I saw everything wrong with the way I've handled her all these years. That made me sick? I closed the book. That helps. But I still need time. That weekend, I drove out to spend 2 nights at a friend's house in Maryland, just to clear my head. Marissa was more than happy to have me. We drank wine on her porch, grilled vegetables, and talked about everything but what had happened. It was what I needed: distance, perspective, silence that wasn't loaded. When I came back, the house felt tentative. Silas had cleaned obsessively, as he tends to when he's anxious, fresh flowers on the table, fridge fully stocked, clean sheets on the guest bed. His way of trying to make everything feel safe again. I didn't move back into our bedroom. That Monday, Bernice showed up. She called first, asked if she could come over to talk. I agreed, but only because I wanted her to say the words to my face. She arrived right on time, dressed more formally than I'd ever seen her outside of church. A pale blue cardigan, slacks, no jewelry. She held a plate of lemon squares, her signature apology currency, but I didn't invite her to hand them over. We sat in the living room. Silas stayed in the kitchen, nearby but silent. I owe you an apology, she began, and for once, there was no sarcasm in her voice. I waited. What I said at the party was wrong. It was cruel. And it came from a place of bitterness that isn't your fault. Still, I said nothing. I've had a hard time accepting the life Silas built with you. Not because you aren't good to him, you are. But because you're strong in ways I'm not used to. And instead of respecting that, I've tried to make you feel small. She looked at me then, her eyes clearer than I'd expected. You didn't deserve what I said. Not privately, and certainly not in front of your colleagues. I was trying to hurt you. And I did. I'm sorry. I studied her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't trying to hug me. She was just sitting there, waiting. It was the first time I'd ever heard her take accountability. And part of me wanted to meet her there. But another part of me, the part that had been quietly bleeding for years, wasn't ready to make room again. I appreciate the apology, I said. But it doesn't erase what happened. Or what came before. I know that, she said quietly. I stood. It's going to take time. And effort. Not just from you, but from Silas, too. She nodded, stood, and for once, didn't offer a hug. She simply turned and walked out. Silas came into the room a few minutes later. How did it go? He asked. She said what she needed to say, I replied. Now we'll see if she meant it. In the weeks that followed, things shifted, slowly, but perceptibly. Silas started therapy. He found a counselor through his school district's health plan. He didn't make a big announcement about it, just casually mentioned it one evening while making dinner. I talked to someone today. About boundaries. About us. About her. I didn't say much. But I cooked next to him that night instead of watching from the sidelines. At work, I stepped fully into my new role. Rena pulled me aside after one of our planning meetings and said, "You're different." Not in a bad way. Just louder in a room. I like it. I didn't explain why. But I knew it was because something inside me had shifted. I had always worked hard. But now, I was allowing myself to take up space. One afternoon, Silas brought home takeout from my favorite Ethiopian restaurant and sat down across from me with an envelope. He handed it to me without a word. Inside was a letter. In his handwriting. Pages of it. Explaining what he'd realized. What he regretted. What he wanted to rebuild. What he knew couldn't happen unless I believed he would protect me, not just from his mother, but from anything that threatened my sense of safety in our marriage. I read it in silence. Then folded it neatly and placed it in my nightstand drawer. "I'm not moving back into our room yet," I said gently. But that was a good start. He nodded. No pushing. No pleading. And for once, I didn't feel like I was carrying all of it on my own. Weeks turned into a couple of months. Things between Silas and me slowly, painstakingly, began to mend. The letter he wrote wasn't just words, it was a beginning of action. He went to therapy consistently, began opening up about his lifelong pattern of conflict avoidance, and even started confronting other ways he'd unconsciously prioritized harmony over honesty. He also didn't let his mother off the hook. That was the real test for me. For once, he didn't cave to her guilt trips or manipulations. He stayed firm. When she tried to invite herself over one afternoon without checking with me first, he told her no, plain and simple. I heard him say it on the phone from the kitchen. "No, Mom. You don't get to just show up anymore." That was the moment I knew things were really changing. Meanwhile, at work, I fully stepped into my new role as Director of Strategic Programs. The leadership team was responsive, my team respected me, and my inbox was full of invitations to panels and think tanks that previously ignored me. My work spoke louder now, but so did I. Then, one morning about 3 months after the birthday party, Rena came into my office with a smirk. "You're going to enjoy this," she said, sitting down and handing me a printout. It was a nomination form for a federal commission, the kind of appointment that shapes policy at a national level. My name was on it. I blinked. "This isn't a joke?" I asked, stunned. "Not even a little." "I put you forward," Rena said, folding her arms. "They'd been scouting for someone with your experience. I gave them everything you've done in the last 3 years. They were impressed. Very impressed." My hands trembled slightly as I held the form. "You should have told me." She shrugged. "I thought it'd be more fun this way." We both laughed. The role wasn't full-time, it was more of a high-level advisory position that would meet quarterly, but it was prestigious. Powerful. The kind of thing people built their careers around. And I was about to walk into it with a new title, a new backbone, and a new clarity about what I would and wouldn't tolerate, at home or at work. I didn't tell Silas right away. I let myself sit with it first. I wanted to enjoy the moment on my own, without filtering it through anyone else's reactions. But I did have someone else in mind who deserved to know. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But because sometimes, a little taste of consequences is the most poetic revenge of all. So I called Bernice. When she answered, her voice was polite. Guarded. "Hello? Hi, Bernice. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to share some news." A pause. "Of course. I've been nominated for a federal advisory commission. It's a national appointment. Very selective." Another pause. Longer this time. "Well," she said, and I could hear the tightness in her voice, "congratulations. That's quite something." "It is," I replied. "I thought it was important you heard it from me." Silence. Then, just barely, "You must be very proud of yourself." "I am," I said, smiling. "Because I earned it." I let that hang in the air a moment longer than necessary. She didn't reply. I ended the call pleasantly and went about my day. That weekend, we hosted a small cookout, just a few friends, some neighbors, and my department's deputy director, Maya, who had become a close ally. Silas helped set up but didn't pressure me about inviting Bernice. He didn't even mention it. And for once, it didn't feel like a void. It felt like peace. During the evening, Maya asked me if I'd thought about eventually running the entire organization. I laughed, genuinely. She didn't. I'm serious, she said. We've all been talking. You've got vision. You're respected. And you've learned how to navigate people like a pro. I thanked her, but what stayed with me was the way she said it. Like it wasn't a wild idea. Like it was already written, waiting for me to step into it. Later that night, Silas and I sat outside after the guests had left. The backyard was quieter than it had been at my birthday, but it felt fuller somehow. I'm proud of you, he said. This time, I smiled and believed him. You should be, I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it, not just about his pride in me, but about mine and myself. The real revenge wasn't the job, or the commission, or the applause that came later. It was reclaiming my space. It was building a life where no one got to shrink me without consequence. And it was knowing that the people who tried to, whether out of malice or cowardice, would have to sit on the sidelines and watch me rise anyway. Quiet. Dignified. Unbothered. And absolutely unstoppable.